minutes on the clock. Do we need
Button
to
up. You don't
introduce
get
her?
anything extra in here.
You got a button? That's the situation? All right.
Got to button it up.
Let's just start. I feel like well, we've seen each other since then.
You're going to do a long bio intro?
Yeah. The championship didn't necessarily go the way that you thought it was going to go. I know.
No, did not.
It did not. But what have the last few months been like in terms of you're out of a boot, you're into the shoes.
Look at me. Yeah, it's good.
You get to go places. You get to go to the Final Four.
Yeah.
You're launching this production company again. What is it? What have the past few months been like?
Honestly, amazing.
Yeah.
It has been confirmed. I was very ready to retire and very excited to be retired. Obviously, Sue preceded me in that by a year, which was a year full of me being jealous about all the cool things that she was able to do while I was going to Tukwila to go to my training facility. I've been doing rehab, which has been like the easiest rehab of my life because, it matters, but it doesn't really. It's down there healing, it's doing its thing. I had an amazing surgeon, I have a great PT, and so it's mostly on them if I don't get back. And yeah, I think I sort of designed a little bit more space and was really intentional about having a little bit more space going into retirement, and then tearing my Achilles that, kind of blew that open even more, and it was really easy to say no for a while, so took advantage of that and had a pretty easy end of the year, and yeah, now I'm just a real fangirl. I love women's sports so much. And it's like, I knew that, but yeah, everybody clap that up. Yeah, I obviously knew that, but being able to just be on the fan side and just watch games, going to the Final Four, was able to make it to the Reign home opener. I, shed my couple of tears about not being out there.
Were you really that sad about that, though?
I was sad, but I'm also unwilling and unmotivated to do anything required to be out there. So I'm if I could show up on Sunday and be in my prime, I would love that. But that is not the case. So I'm really excited about just where the space is. I'm so excited. You mentioned Sue and I's production company. We just announced our first really exciting project, Cleat Cute. You knew we were going to do gay stuff, so obviously we were starting with that. And yeah, I'm just really excited to kind of use, I feel like, everything that I learned in my whole career, and also the sort of skills and talent that I had that were off the field. I feel like they really bode well for this next phase of my life.
So Final Four, you've seen Caitlin Clark up close a few times, but you've also seen everything around it. Mm-hmm. And just in terms of the landscape, what are your takeaways where you think, okay, we've got all this energy happening, how do we harness that?
Oh gosh, big question, Meg. I think something that was so clear for me, and obviously I have the most educated, nuanced view of women's basketball because of Sue, and I feel like I'm just constantly, understanding layer after layer after layer because she's been a part of so much. And at the Final Four, I thought a lot about the sort of capturing of a moment, and oftentimes this, either a flash of the pan or, World Cup 2019 or 2020 bubble season for the WNBA. This year, obviously, for the Women's Final Four. I thought a lot about the national team because it's such a solid foundation and a multi-generational, multi-decade foundation that our team was able to stand on, that I was able to stand on, even in our fight for equal pay, that made it possible to really capture a moment and have it not just be a flash in the pan. And I think to this Final Four, Sue's Final Four when she was in college had 30,000 people at the game and had 5 million viewers. It's been there. The WNBA has been around for 28 years and really doesn't get the sort of credit as the legacy women's sports league that all of us are really basing all the other leagues off of and base so much of our structure and our thinking off of. So I look at Caitlin and what she's, it's so much more than Caitlin though. It's huge storyline around Dawn Staley and her, yeah. She's goated, I think. She's goated, and it doesn't look like she's slowing down. Incredible undefeated season, and the only reason it wasn't the only thing talked about is because Caitlin was like going absolutely bonkers. And so just knowing like the foundation that they're all standing on, and I think particularly in the last 5 or 6 years, really since the bubble season, I think the work that the W did in solidifying like who women's basketball is. It's very much black women. It's very much gay women. It's a very inclusive and open space. Like being at the Final Four was incredible because everyone just was like, we're winning. Like everyone felt like they were winning every game, no matter who won. It felt like it was sort of what the game deserved and what I think fans of women's sports really deserved. And I think in a huge part it's because Caitlin is, standing on Sue Bird and Diana Taurasi and Maya Moore. And I'm not just naming UConn players, but I gotta keep good graces, and the Dawn Staleys and Lisa, everybody. So, Caitlin is, I mean, you got to capture the moment also. And my God, she has. So I can't wait. I know I'm going to the game when they play in Seattle, and we'll be back here for the one in New York, and I'm just as big a fan as everybody.
Yeah, just in terms of when we were talking about this panel and what we wanted to address, you sent me a 2021 article from Kate Fagan, who I don't believe is here today, but... And I actually have a passage that I wanted to read because Asia Wilson had this quote. Again, I'm reading something from 2021, and it's very funny to me because I feel like so much of this article, I'm like, oh, it's right now. Like, we're still having the same conversation. She said about the WNBA, "We are standing on the shoulders of women who didn't back down just because casual sports fans didn't think that they were worthy. That's what makes our league better because we have faced those hurdles. I can't think of another league that gets hit with every single last knock, and I don't see that going away, but we're not going to let that stop us." And we were talking about the suppression of women's sports, sometimes self-sabotage of women's sports, but right at the moment, we're in this space where, maybe as Kate put it, we're not in this phase where the groundwater has been poisoned, but there is this shift in public sentiment. Are you seeing that?
I am seeing it. Yeah, definitely. I mean, my little brother's 22 or 23 now, and he's all in. And obviously he is, because we're like, don't fuck it up, okay? Be a good kid. But like him and his friends are into it and watching it at a bar, and like the brand money that's coming in. I mean, 18 million people watch the final. That is more than just capturing a moment and more than just a flash in the pan. But I think you really are starting to see a shift in that, and a shift in the sort of general consciousness of like, oh, this actually is a really great product, and this is a great sport, and this is something different than everything that I've been told about it for so long. It's not exciting, it's not this, it's not that. That's obviously not the case. Every single game was incredible at the Final Four and even throughout the whole tournament. And I think it really is a watershed moment that can, really propel and be sort of the bottom of the hockey stick. And Sue said this, so many times, but I think the long-range shooting of Caitlin was a little bit of the antidote to, always talking about dunking. It's like nothing is more exciting than someone shooting from like 5 million yards away and like just making them regularly. So I think we are starting to see that. And I just even, whether it's like funds or VC money coming in, you're seeing bigger valuations for NWSL clubs, you're seeing expansion in all the leagues. The hockey league just had like the biggest attendance ever. So I think that not only the general public, but I think like the business side of things is all really coming together and being seen as something like you need to get in now. And this is not just like an investment for a mission or investment because it's the right thing. It's like you can actually make a lot of money, and you should do it now, not tomorrow or the next day.
Yeah, I think one of the other things too is I think we get really stuck in this language of this is an inflection point. We haven't seen this stuff before. It's not a moment, it's a movement. And it doesn't necessarily allow us to think about the moment that we're in right now. and where that investment is and where there still needs to be investment. Because I think about, I come from a hockey background too. And I think about the boycott in 2017 with USA Hockey. I think about, to your point, the new league, but how PWHPA had to like split off and kind of feel like, it reminded me of some of the struggles with NWSL players of trying to force the league to be better. So how do we grapple with like wanting to harness the potential without letting go of the moment that we're actually in?
Well, I wish I had $500 million, Megan. I think it really now is like building the business and the infrastructure around the sport, because it doesn't really matter how good a player is or a team is or a moment is or a league is if you don't have all of the necessary mechanisms to capture it. I mean, I've definitely been through that 2015 when we won the World Cup, and we were like, well, this can't be it. There's nothing in place for us to take advantage of literally anything. So there's not even anywhere to point. So I think the infrastructure around it, whether that is like having a really amazing CBA and investing in that from a player side, but also from a league side. Obviously, the media deals, big one for the NWSL. I think the WNBA is up next year. Fan experience, huge one. Like sports betting. I think that's been obviously huge in men's sports. It's one of I always compare sports betting to cannabis. Like sports betting just showed up one day and like literally everybody knew how to do it. You know what I mean? They're like, you don't have to explain what a parlay is. They're like, we know, we'll take the purple strain. So I think that's a huge area of revenue for women's sports, and also a really amazing opportunity for education and like creating a different kind of interest in the league outside of just like who's the star player and who's the best team, or maybe there's a sort of rivalry team. So different business ideas like that, and I think media is like crucial. Yeah, I know. Meg, you know, Meg, you know how important you are to everything that I've done, certainly. I feel like we were a good team. You used me and I used you. I was like, you're going to get a good quote here if you ask that question. But building that, it's all part of sort of the growth of the sport. And having the right narratives out there, at least having nuanced narratives out there, and having debate and having critique and having people know the stories and all of that. Like at the end of the day, sports is an entertainment property. Like that's what it's here for. It's meant to entertain. Of course, there's a purity of the sport out on the court or out on the field or whatever it may be. But the rest of it is for entertainment. So how do we know these players, and how do we interact with these players, whether it's on social media or turning on ESPN or any of these other networks? I think it's really important to like fill that out. So then when you're going to these games or you're watching them or whatever, you have so much more than your like some people are just hardcore fans and they're going strictly for the sport and that's it. But for the most of us, we're not. We just want to be entertained, and we want to be sort of a part of a really cool movement. And I think the thing about women's sports, which is so amazing, it's the intersection of literally everything in life happens in women's sports at all times, whether that's like trans rights, racial rights, equal pay, gender identity, whatever it is. It's like it's always happening in women's sports. So it gives, I think, players, but it also gives the general public this like outlet to make a difference and to be a part of the conversation and be a part of, ultimately making the world a better place.
Do you feel... I mean, you have never been shy in saying what you would like to say, but how do you feel like players coming into this world now navigate that pressure of... for the U.S. Women's National Team, the U.S. Women's National Team has always been bigger, but equal pay has now kind of, it's not this ever-present thing of, okay, we're going to have a game on Saturday, but on Friday night we're going to have 1,000 pages of legal documents dump with everybody staying up to read them to figure it out. So how, for this next generation coming in, where do you see those opportunities of saying, it's not just you on a field or on a court, you have a chance here to make this into something that is your own?
I mean, I wish I was born in this time. I know that. Like, it was certainly a point of like, community between our team to have those fights and like motivation and like. But I could have been motivated about other things too. Like, I think for these players right now, I'm like, you have an opportunity to usher in like a massive business growth for leagues. And that's what I would be focusing on. It's like, unfortunately, you're still going to have to deal with some of the inequalities, whether it's just, general, casual, passive sexism or racism or homophobia. Like that is all still there. But I think that there's such an opportunity sort of like, post equal pay, if you will, in soccer, and like there's a huge media deal coming up for the WNBA, to really be a part of ushering in like a CBA that will change everything.
Yeah.
I think it's really important, obviously, to get that foundation, but now it's really like, how do we take it to the next level? And I think the more you're involved, the better your deal is. And the less you're involved, the worse your deal. It's so simple. It's just like, it's if the players are involved and have an active voice and are constantly, being organized and educated and like beating that drum, like it's just better for everyone. I think the player's voice is so important. It's the thing that the CBA and the agreements and the sponsorships and everything interacts through the players at every intersect. So I think for them, I'm like, I don't know, just selfishly, like, do you want to make more money? Do you want the sport to grow? Do you want your facilities to be better? Do you want a soccer-specific stadium? Do you want your own training facility? Do you want to fly charter? Do you, want higher salaries? All of that. Like, that's sort of in your court, and you may not get everything, but you can be a part of taking these huge steps one after another. I think a lot of times it's like you get a group that's really motivated, usually coming off a group that's not really motivated, and, on goes the cycle. So I would just say, like, I know it's a little daunting, I think I even feel that with the national team. I think they're like, well, we're coming after you guys, like, what? But it's like, yeah, that's, heavy as the crown. Like, you're on the national team and you're the best player and you guys are the best players in the world and you have this opportunity and you're capable and you're smart and you're obviously good enough to do it. So I would just say really step into it, because if you don't, it's going to step all over you.
Now that you're out of the actual mode of playing, do you find it easier to maybe think about, okay, basketball's here, hockey's here, soccer, like how do you connect all of these webs? Because it does feel like when we talk about women's sports, we talk about women's sports and not just what's good for WNBA is good for WNBA and it's not good for everyone else. So now that you're out of it, are you kind of like, oh, okay, I get to like touch all of these other places?
Yeah, I can definitely be better educated. I mean, obviously I have a deep soccer background and Sue has a deep basketball background. So I think we speak about that the most, but I think they're also the two most influential sports around women's sports. I mean, certainly the most influential team sports. I think so much of it is the same. Might not be at the same, point in the history or the same juncture or whatever, but anything that like hockey's going through right now, we went through and the WNBA went through and, track went through and, what tennis went through, whatever it may be. So I think there's always like so many parallels and so many threads that you can pull together. And it's really kind of the same thing, is that we've been told that, women are all of these things that we know that we're not. And it's just a matter of, I think, changing those narratives. And I think for me, I've always wanted to tie myself and to tie, whether it's equal pay or something, to another thread. That's not exactly the same, but it pretty much is. It's like oppression is oppression is oppression, and there's certainly levels to it. But I think the more we can tie ourselves together, the more momentum that we can draw on from each other in having these big changes.
Just in terms of, I guess, I think earlier you brought up, I wish I had $500 million, but if you did have $500 million, what are you doing with it right now? Vacation.
Yeah, vacation. Yeah, definitely vacation. Well, I'm going to give my ideas, and then someone with $500 million is probably going to steal them, and I'm going to see it like tomorrow. No, I mean, I would bet heavy into women's sports, whether that's owning teams. I would bet heavy into media and content and the sort of like entertainment around that. I don't know a ton about the betting, but I'm like, it seems like people are really into it and they love spending all their money on it. So whether you're watching any type of game, it seems like the bets are the same. So I would go heavy into that space. And then I would also go heavy into the sort of like community mission aspect of it. I think that sports always and forever has the ability to change the world and make the world a better place, and women's sports is like steroids on that.
Yeah.
I think that is a really important part and a big differentiator from men's sports for us that we should really focus on and lean into and use as a core principle and a core pillar of the business.
I feel like one of the ideas that you keep bringing up is education. Do you think we're at the level we're at in women's sports in terms of, if you're a new fan coming in, because I feel like we're getting more and more of those new fans every day, right? You think about how many people watch the Final Four. There are a lot of people who have no idea what's happening, right? Like,
yeah, none.
how would you think about, okay, we're going to bring you into this fold and we're going to catch you up?
Yeah, this is something I am like personally, I feel like working through, because having had beat the drum for so long and to beg for and try to convince people of your humanity and of your craft and how good you are, like, it is frustrating.
Yeah.
And but like, we have to have space for people to learn and for new people to be here. That's like exactly what we want. So I am petty, and so sometimes I am just like that's dumb. That's literally dumb what you're saying. But people don't like to be told that.
No.
But I do think it's an opportunity as these new people come in. This is why I think the media part and all of the sort of like content, whether it's ESPN or the broadcast or podcast or whatever it may be, is so important, because that's the educational piece. And there's lots of different views and lots of differing views, and that's okay. But I think the more we can talk about it and the more we can dispel a lot of those myths, the more narrative and nuance we can put around the sport for people new coming in, I think is really important. I think for me personally, it takes some humility, because I'm just like, I've been fucking saying this literally for like 20 years. And so many people have, of course, and so many athletes. But I think that part is really important. And I think a message to everybody coming in, like, yes, this is the most inclusive space you could ever be in the world. And we love that, and that's really important. But like, you need to take care of that as well and be respectful of that and have humility and like, understand that we have been here. Yeah, we're happy you're here, and we have been here, and like, it's a great place, and let's grow this together. And some of it is just going to be, growing pains and realizing. I think this is happening a lot. A lot of men's sports fans are coming over to the women's space, and it's not exactly the same. There's some things that are similar, but starting to understand the difference and how to talk about it. But I think it takes patience, but also like, this is what we want. This is exactly what we want. We want more eyeballs. We want, more people in the seats. We want more fans. And that brings everything else. That brings really the entire business. So it's a personal journey and growth that I'm working on with my therapist and other people. But it's also, just like an unbelievably exciting time. Like, Sue and I talk about all the time, and obviously we went to the Final Four. We love sports, and it just, sometimes we just look at each other like, this, we're jealous, obviously. This, just a little bit jealous in not a bad way. But also, like, this is incredible what's happening right now, and like, the future is so bright.
I mean, what I think about, I remember watching you in a game in Boston 2011 post World Cup, like
bleachers, yeah.
Yeah.
Butt on metal
by
bleachers.
Police, right? Because you had kind of exploded in popularity, and I just sometimes think about the community that was around WPS at that time and how small it felt, and like, everybody went on Twitter when it was still Twitter and had hashtag WPS chat, right? And like, how do we make sure that we don't lose the soul of some of these communities as the eyeballs come in, as the money comes in, that, what makes women's sports so special stays that way?
I think the athletes are always at the core. That is the business. Without them, nothing can happen. And certainly they need support in other ways, but without athletes, you don't have any sort of business. And I think with women's athletes, you always have this like unbelievable level of care for what they're doing, care for the community, care for the other teammates. It's a really, really generally inclusive place, and there's the intersection of everything said, like, I played with Quinn, the first trans player in the league. And, we played obviously with black players and gay players being one myself and, international players coming. Like, I think the players have always led, and I think it's really important for everyone to follow that. There's always, it's like if we're talking about abortion rights, you're talking about, athletes. And if you're talking about racial justice, you're talking about athletes. Like every intersection in life happens in women's sports. And I think it's really important to keep focusing on that. If we're taking care of those athletes and taking care of each other, then like sort of the rest will follow. And I think the narratives will follow from that. But women's sports has just always been a place where we have showed up for each other and for everyone else and leveraged the talent that we have and like leveraged the craft and the business and the publicity and the popularity of it all to ultimately make the world a better place. I feel like when the world's a better place, sports is a better place, and vice versa.
Yeah, just in terms of, I guess, what comes next, obviously you have the production company, but when you're thinking about, okay, is there one thing in particular that if you could like go in and change something right now? Oh, God. What keeps you up at night?
Like all the media deals, really.
Yeah.
It would be accessible everywhere. It would be consistent. I mean, we know if you're a hardcore fan, you're on NWSL Plus, you're on ION, you're on, ESPN,
ABC,
you're
CBS.
on CBS, you're on ABC,
Yeah.
you're on Paramount Plus, you're on everything. So I would invest mightily into that space and making it easy to find, making the broadcast the best that they can possibly be. Something I've been railing on recently isn't it just like so crazy? We'll just use NBA, WNBA, how whoever has the broadcast, ESPN is sort of the dual partner for both. And it's like in the NBA, they have the most elite version of production for the NBA games. And they know that is the best version of the product that they are trying to sell, because ultimately when they put it on TV, they're selling it. So the best version of the product they're trying to sell is going to get the best version of the package that they can give as a broadcaster. And then when they put the WNBA on, they like knowingly give a lesser version of that package and sell a lesser version. It's like you're selling it. It's yours. Like this is insane. So you're like purposely like devaluing the product that you're trying to sell and then blaming the product for it not being good enough. Honestly, it's totally insane. So I would invest heavily into that, and I know that is happening, and I know that is becoming, but the sort of like user experience and watching that and just the consistency of where it shows up and how it shows up and the quality of which it shows up and the replays and the camera angles and VAR and, all of that, I think plays into that. And, most people are not, going to a game on a regular basis. So the majority of people watching, obviously, are watching either on their phones or their tablets or their TVs or whatever they're watching in. So I would go hardcore into that space.
Do you feel like people are still waiting for like this perfect investment chance, or are we kind of out of that where, I mean, even in my own career, right? Like sometimes my job didn't exist until 5 years ago. There was no full-time women's soccer reporter until The Athletic finally was like, oh, maybe we should do that, right? Like maybe there's an audience for that. And I feel like sometimes people are waiting for the justification to be present in order to take that leap, and they want, because as you said, like you want the results before you actually jump.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what always happens with, women just in general, but certainly women's sports is, in men's sports, it's called an investment. In women's sports, it's called a cost. So, like, you have to invest. No, like, you can't start a business with $1 and then run it on $1 and then hope to make a bunch more. Like, it doesn't work like that. So, I think that's very true. I think it's this space that's like, oh my God, it's growing so much, but where do we actually put the investment? I think there's a little bit of that happening. I think if you aren't just like deeply in women's sports and you're sort of showing up new, you like kind of get it, but kind of don't. So I don't know, you can like hire some advisors. Honestly, I ought to hire some fan advisors, and like they'd probably kill it in a hedge fund. They would just be like, do this, that person's not this. This is the market, whatever. But I do think we I think it's less. It's certainly becoming less, but I do think we sort of, suffer. It's the America Ferrera Barbie monologue where it's just like too skinny, not skinny enough, too pretty, not pretty enough. It's just like all these things. All of a sudden, everybody's bringing out every single metric that we can, judge something on. But I think when you really take a step back, like, is women's sports getting smaller? Are we like having less women in the world? No, none of that. So yeah. Yeah, if anything, there's more people being born. Anyways, but yeah, abortion jab. But I do think that the space is really opening up, and I think the valuations and the expansion teams and all of those in the new media deals is such an amazing sign that like the real money and the real capitalization into women's sports is really here. I think we're at like the very beginning of it, and certainly in the next 5 years, I can't even imagine. It was really like even 5 years ago, I was like, oh my god, I can't even imagine that we were here. Having the Reign sell for like
3.5.
Yeah, 3.5, and then and then $58 million. Like I would never. That's maybe 30. I would have said it's a nice little jump, but. It's really like incredible to see all the money and all the capital and just all the interest and excitement and like love that women's sports is getting, because it's been such a beacon, I think, for so many people for so long for a myriad of different reasons, and it's coming into its glow up for sure.
All right, we're out of time. One quick last question. What sporting event are you most excited to go to next?
Well, the Olympics are coming up.
Yeah. Small.
I am excited. I am very excited to see Caitlin play for the first time. I am very excited to see our new look Seattle Storm team play. I have gone to a Reign game this year. It was sad to see my boys out there without me, but it's just like they're doing so great. And the Olympics, like I want to go to all the Olympic events.
So hard because they're all the same.
I know
thing.
they're all at the same time, but I would love to do some track and field. Definitely, obviously, if the U.S. are in those later rounds, I'll be going to those. We'll be going to all the basketball games. So I'm just a big sports lesbian, you guys, and I'm excited for it all. Basically, is the answer.
Yeah. Thank you.
And to go to a Gotham game so I can boo everyone.
Look at this.
Just kidding. Love them. Just love them. Thank you, Meg.